I'm Owen Jensen. Tonight on EWTN News Nightly, buckle up. Stocks go on a wild ride as markets try to assess the potential impact from President Trump's global trade war. We have the latest. Back again, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu makes his second trip to Washington in 2 months. Why this visit is different than his first. Rising rivers, the southern and midwestern United States face dangerous flooding after torrential rain and storms. And a surprise appearance. 2 weeks after leaving the hospital, Pope Francis makes an unexpected entrance during the Jubilee for the sick and healthcare workers. Here is a message to pilgrims. These stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you for being with us. I'm Owen Jensen. Our top story tonight on this Monday, a whiplash day on Wall Street. The markets closed without any huge loss this time. The Dow down 349, though at one point it was down as much as 1,700 points. The NASDAQ ended slightly up, and the S&P 500 was down 11 points. President Donald Trump doubling down, however, in the Oval Office, saying this.
We're going to have one shot at this. And no other president's going to do this, what I'm doing. And I'll tell you what, it's an honor to do it because we have been just destroyed. What they've done to our system. You know, we have $36 trillion of debt for a reason.
Trump says he plans to put additional tariffs on China if it does not rescind its retaliatory tariffs. Meanwhile, markets across the globe, of course, are reacting. And join us now to break all this down, Catherine Pekulik, Director of Political Economy and Associate Professor with the Bush School of Business at the Catholic University of America. Great to see you.
Hi, Owen.
All right, let's get right to it. The markets last week, towards the end, right? You don't want to go back to that.
I know.
Today, everyone was wondering, was it going to be kind of the hand over the eyes thing? The numbers were right here, as I mentioned in the opening, the Dow down 349, the NASDAQ up 15 points, the S&P down 11, but it did start out pretty rocky. Bottom line, your assessment of today's movement on Wall Street.
Yeah, it indicates more of the same. I mean, people are really confused, not sure what to expect. I think that we will probably see more of the same for the next week, kind of ups and downs. Nobody's expecting I don't know, somebody might have been expecting a complete crash this morning. But, the markets are always looking for more information and trying to assess. There were rumors this morning about maybe Trump backing off, a 90-day pause, that kind of thing. But I think this is overall pretty expected given what we're seeing from the Trump administration right now.
So you have a 401k. I don't know if you do, I'm not asking, but I do. I know a lot of people who do, right? And again, one of those, I'm just going to avoid this for a while.
Yeah, don't look.
What would your advice be? Or let me take that back.
Yeah.
How do you think the general feeling is out there for people who own 401ks?
Yeah, well, it's obviously disappointing, but I think it's a little too early to decide whether or not everybody needs to reevaluate their positions. I think holding for a few more days or maybe a few weeks would be a good idea. We're seeing this administration is highly volatile, in these ups and downs. And so, so probably if we can have the stomach for it, we should just wait and hold off a little bit.
Certainly. What's the point in panicking? The long run, the markets are, if you kind of step back, right, look at the long term, it's generally up. If you look really close in the nuance of it, of course you're going to have those type of things.
That's right.
But I'm not let me just make sure, I'm not an analyst or an investor, expert, nothing like that. So everyone at home knows. Okay. Looking at this from a Catholic perspective, what does the Catechism say, if anything, on tariffs and trade in general?
Yeah. So the Catechism is, I think appropriately careful. We don't have a lot in the Catechism on tariff, but we do see that a couple of popes, Pope Benedict actually pretty recently weighed in on tariffs and kind of said, look. I mean, when wealthy countries like the United States put high tariffs on goods that are coming in from the less developed world, this is a problem for those countries. It's something that maybe we need to take into consideration. But we don't have a ton of guidance. That being said, I mean, that's not very surprising, right? We wouldn't expect to open the Catechism and find kind of a handbook on how to do surgery. we would
Page
we would
one,
expect
tariffs,
basic,
right? No.
Yeah, we would expect basic principles. I mean, take into account the overall health of the patient. Don't cut off the nose to spite the face. I mean, that sort of thing. And I think that's the spirit of which we have to think about this. There are some general principles that we have had for several hundred years. Generally, trade is a win-win. This hasn't gone away. And the Catechism generally and the popes have urged us for a couple of hundred years to see the fact of God's creation and our opportunity to trade with each other as really a good thing and a providential thing. So, we would hope that this would be short-lived, this trade war would be short-lived, and we could kind of go back to reciprocal agreements that are like, that don't place huge burdens on trade.
And Catherine, one more thing real quick. We've got to wrap it up here. But
Yep.
I'm sure you're aware, when they showed the list of countries and everything they're being tariffed, the one place not on there, at least that I saw, Vatican City. Did you know that?
I did notice that. Yeah, I don't know how much we buy or what to sell to the Vatican City, but yeah, that's very interesting. So yeah, I hope it's short-lived.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it, Catherine, and we'll talk to you
You're
later.
welcome. You're welcome.
Moving on here. President Donald Trump renewed his calls for the Federal Reserve to cut interest rates, but the economy is not his only focus. He also spent time today dealing with the war in the Middle East. The president is trying to deter Iran while defending Israel's campaign against Hamas terrorists.
President Donald Trump greets Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu outside the West Wing before welcoming him to the Oval Office.
We had great discussions today, I think, on the obvious subject of Iran and also the less obvious subject with respect to Israel, and that's trade.
We will eliminate the trade deficit with the United States. We intend to do it very quickly. We think it's the right thing to do. And of course, we also discussed Iran. Look, we're both united in the goal that Iran does not ever get nuclear weapons.
Israel relaunched its war against Hamas last month and now controls half of Gaza after expanding its buffer zone. The president of Egypt has been involved in peace negotiations. Today he called on both sides to resume a ceasefire in Gaza. Thousands of people have died during the war in the Middle East, although a new report questions the figures provided by Hamas. And new today, the head of the Palestinian Red Cross Society called for an independent investigation into the killing of 15 Palestinian medics by Israeli forces last month.
No one should be above the law.
Prime Minister Netanyahu said last week that even after Hamas is defeated, Israel will keep security control in Gaza and push Palestinians to leave.
And we're committed to getting all the hostages out, but also eliminating the evil tyranny of Hamas in Gaza and enabling the people of Gaza to freely make a choice to go wherever they want.
Well, I'd like to see the war stop, and I think the war will stop at some point that won't be in the too distant future. Right now we have a problem with hostages. We're trying to get the hostages out.
For more, let's bring in Aaron David Miller. He is an American Middle East analyst, author, and former negotiator, as well as a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, focusing on U.S. foreign policy. Aaron, thank you very much for being with us here today. We'll get right to it. Let me throw my glasses on here first. To the day, I believe it's been a year and a half now, October 7th of 2023, since Hamas invaded Israel, launching the horrific war there. Simple question. Are you surprised it's gone on this long? Do you see it ending anytime soon, sir?
Number one, no, I'm not surprised. You have two parties who are locked, frankly, in what I would argue would be a existential conflict. There are politics also, which drive in one of them, that is the current Israeli prime minister on trial for bribery, fraud, breach of trust. It's better for him, frankly, to preserve his right-wing coalition at the war continues to simmer. But Hamas also bears a huge responsibility, not just for the terror surge of October 7, but to the reality that they will demand something that neither Israel nor any government, no one on the planet is going to give them. They're going to want a guarantee that the war will end as a condition for releasing the 59 remaining hostages, half of whom the Israelis believe are no longer alive, and also withdrawal of all Israeli forces from Gaza. And this brings us, I think, to the stark reality that the requirements of each side with respect to the end game are simply not there. Right
now, as I understand, it's being reported that Israel is in control of about 50% 50% of Gaza, 50% of Gaza. What impact does that have on things going
Well,
forward?
I think, they don't want to reoccupy Gaza, although there are elements of the Israeli right wing who want not just to occupy it, they want to return the 8,000 or more Israeli settlers that the late Prime Minister Sharon withdrew, including Israeli forces from Gaza in 2005. The occupation of that territory is designed to create more pressure on Hamas, to demonstrate the possibility that the Israelis will maintain overall security responsibility.
Talking tariffs, Trump imposed a 17% tariff on Israel recently. I believe Israel dropped their tariffs on goods from the U.S., mostly on imported food and ag products. How do you see this playing out?
I think the Prime Minister's taken a risk, and I think the President invited him to come, but I think the Prime Minister pushed to come sooner rather than later. I think the Prime Minister wants to convince the President, given the fact that in 1985, the United States implemented a free trade agreement with Israel, the first FTA it implemented with any country. I think he wants to get those tariffs down, not to zero, that would be great, but I think he wants to get them down to at least 10%.
The U.S. attacks on the Houthis, do you believe that's working?
It's more aggressive and perhaps keeping the Houthis more on the defensive than under the previous administration, but it is not a solution to the problem of the Houthis.
Right.
I mean, they govern most of a failed state. They have access to oil resources, and geography is destiny, and they are very well positioned to continue to cause the international community a big headache. You just cannot destroy the Houthis, unfortunately, through an air campaign.
And then if you own a shipping company, Aaron, and you're running ships to the Red Sea, do you feel comfortable doing that right now? Would you go around Africa?
No, and that's why most of the major companies won't go back to the Red Sea. They've taken a long route, which costs them more money. It's another 10 days. But I think that shipping rates have also built that in now. And I don't think the major shipping companies are in any hurry to return to the Red Sea through the Suez Canal, which is costing the Egyptians, of course, a lot of money in terms of tolls. They're not hurried to return unless there's literally a comprehensive sealed agreement. There'll be no more strikes on international shipping. And that no one can guarantee.
All right, Aaron David Miller, we'll have to leave it right there. We're out of time. Thank you very much for joining us today, sir.
Oh, and thanks. It was a pleasure.
Okay. And sticking with the Houthis, Yemen's Houthi rebels report that U.S. airstrikes killed at least 6 people over the weekend. A bombing video posted by President Trump suggests casualty numbers in the campaign may even be higher. The black and white drone footage on Truth Social shows a group of more than 70 people gathered in a circle. The intense airstrikes in Yemen resumed last month after the Iranian-backed rebels carried out attacks on shipping in the Red Sea. In that time, dozens of people have been killed. Well, this is a huge week on Capitol Hill for House Speaker Mike Johnson and President Trump's agenda. The Speaker is pushing to pass a joint House-Senate budget resolution this week, but there's growing opposition from a number of conservative lawmakers. They want more specifics about what is going to be cut from federal spending. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales has the latest. Eric.
How you doing there, Owen? Yeah, understatement there. The Speaker is facing an uphill battle to get this resolution across the finish line and remain on schedule to enact President Trump's agenda. Key House conservatives, especially members of the Freedom Caucus, well, they started rejecting the Senate budget blueprint just hours after the Senate passed it early Saturday morning. And right now, Speaker Johnson doesn't have the votes to get it passed in the U.S. House.
It's about $2 trillion spending cut difference between the House and the Senate. It speaks to what Budget Chairman Arrington calls an unserious proposal on the part of the Senate. I don't know if I'd go that far, but what I'd say is it's woefully short of where they need to be.
House Speaker Mike Johnson is attempting to gain support. He wrote a letter to GOP colleagues urging passage of the budget blueprint. Quote, "We have and will continue to make it clear in all discussions with the Senate and the White House that in order to secure House passage, the final reconciliation bill must include historic spending reductions while protecting essential programs. But other Republicans aren't buying it and want specifics now on what's going to be cut."
We have an opportunity to work to secure the border, and we have an opportunity to make sure that we are properly and thoughtfully funding our national defense. Those pieces of the puzzle are there. The key is that we come in nowhere near the floor of the Senate plan, which does not have nearly enough savings that I think are necessary.
House Freedom Caucus member Chip Roy is already saying he's a no, posting on X, quote, "The Senate budget is a path to failure. Instead, we should get busy drafting a reconciliation package that will work, that will actually produce spending reductions, return to the pre-COVID spending path, and deliver on the promises we campaigned upon." House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffrey says Republicans will increase the deficit by trillions of dollars while attacking the American way of life.
The Republicans have launched an all-out assault on the economy, on Social Security, on Medicare, on Medicaid, on veterans, on public education.
Timing is certainly important for House and Senate Republicans. Both chambers must agree to the same budget blueprint in order to unlock the filibuster-proof process called budget reconciliation. House Speaker Mike Johnson says that he wants to pass it by Wednesday before the start of the 2-week Easter recess. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
All right, Eric, thank you. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops is ending a half-century of partnerships with the U.S. government related to children's services and refugee support. The decision comes after the Trump administration suspended cooperative agreements to resettle refugees. The president of the USCCB, Archbishop Timothy Bergoglio, says the government's decisions have forced the conference to reconsider the best way to serve the needs of those seeking safe harbor from violence and persecution. The USCCB says it will still advocate for policy reforms that provide orderly and secure immigration processes. We have a lot more still to come here on EWTN News Nightly. A final goodbye. Friends and family gather to honor the life and legacy of the first black Republican woman in Congress. And we take a look at Pope Francis's first public appearance in weeks. Welcome back. Today, friends and family of former U.S. Representative Mia Love gathered to honor her life and legacy. Love died last month after a battle with brain cancer. The daughter of Haitian immigrants, Love was the first Republican black woman to serve in the U.S. House of Representatives. She was also very vocal in the pro-life movement. Mia Love was just 49 years old. After a second child dies from measles in Texas, the Department of Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. travels to the epicenter of the outbreak. Since January, nearly 500 cases have been reported in and around Gaines County, with the town of Seminole as the epicenter. The boy who died was not vaccinated. His funeral was held at a Mennonite church. Mr. Kennedy said he was there to comfort the family. He also said he's working to control the outbreak. This is the second child to die of measles this year. The first was in February. That child was not vaccinated either. We turn now to a historic and deadly storm that's been battering parts of the South and Midwest. While the rain is finally subsiding, that does not mean the danger is over. Take a look at Kentucky. After days of relentless rain, floodwaters have submerged homes. Now rising rivers threaten already waterlogged communities. Some areas of Kentucky are under mandatory evacuation orders. The flood threat remains high in other states, such as Arkansas and Indiana. The storms have also spawned destructive and dangerous tornadoes. At least 20 people are dead, including 10 in Tennessee. At the Mass for the Jubilee of the Sick and the World of Healthcare, Pope Francis greeted and thanked the faithful, appearing in public for the first time since his return from the hospital, where he was being treated for double pneumonia. EWTN Vatican journalist Benedict Sederin has more.
Buona domenica a tutti.
Pope Francis was not scheduled to make any official appearances anytime soon. However, he surprised everyone with his first public outing since leaving the hospital on March 23rd, when he visited St. Peter's Square for the Jubilee of the Sick and Healthcare Workers this Sunday. The Holy Father also received the Sacrament of Reconciliation in St. Peter's Basilica, spent time in prayer, and then passed through the Holy Door in union with the pilgrims. About 20,000 pilgrims from around the world came to Rome for the 7th major Jubilee event. For 2 days, patients, doctors, nurses, pharmacists, physiotherapists, healthcare personnel, and technicians from 90 countries gathered for moments of prayer, dialogue, and pilgrimage. The event culminated in a mass in St. Peter's Square presided over by Archbishop Rino Fisichella, who read a homily written by the Pope for the occasion.
Con voi poi, carissimi fratelli e sorelle malati.
I have much in common with you at this time of my life, dear brothers and sisters who are sick. The experience of illness, of weakness, of having to depend on others in so many things, and of needing their support. This is not always easy, but it is a school in which we learn each day to love and to let ourselves be loved.
Different organizations, groups of volunteers, and religious orders also participated in the event. Among them, the Sisters Hospitallers of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, a women's religious order that aims to serve the sick, especially those in need of psychiatric care, suffering from mental illnesses or intellectual disability. In an interview with EWTN, the order's Mother Superior explained their approach to caring for the sick.
Para nosotras, los enfermos son
For us, the sick are like a theological place where God speaks to us, and where we also speak about God to God, and also to be able to accompany the sick themselves and to know so many lives touched by suffering, but which do not lose that sense and that human sensitivity before. On the contrary, the disease makes you closer, more sensitive, more attentive to the needs of the other.
The Mother Superior also emphasized the significant role of faith in a person's rehabilitation journey, noting how it contributes to their overall healing.
For the patients, the most important thing is the proximity, the listening, the attention, and how they also experience the dimension of faith and spirituality is also enriching in their therapeutic process. Your spiritual experience can also influence the therapeutic rehabilitation and recovery process.
Faith can aid in recovery, but the care of the sick can also serve as a path to salvation, the Pope highlighted in his homily.
Egli ci coinvolge.
The Lord invites us in turn to become angels for one another, messengers of his presence, to the point where the sick bed can become a holy place of salvation and redemption, both for the sick and for those who care for them.
In his Angelus message, Pope Francis also shared that throughout his hospitalization and the past 2 weeks of rest in the Vatican, he perceived this finger of God and its benevolent caress through healthcare workers. He ended his message by asking the Lord that this caress of his love might reach those who suffer and encourage those who care for them. In Rome, Benedict Cedegrian, EWTN News Nightly.
Up next on EWTN News Nightly, it's the first of its kind. We'll take you to the Eucharistic Congress for the Deaf. A really neat story. Stick around for that. Sad news out of Haiti, where 2 nuns are dead, murdered by armed gang members. The gang stormed a town in the central part of the country last week. The nuns took refuge in a home in the area, but were found by the gang members and killed. The order they belonged to was the Little Sisters of St. Therese of the Child Jesus. Well, this weekend, the first Eucharistic Congress for the Deaf took place at the St. Elizabeth Ann Seton Shrine in Emmitsburg, Maryland, a historic first for the deaf Catholic community. Julia Convery takes us there.
I'm for South Dakota. We're both from Rochester, New York. Delaware. He says, I'm from Delaware.
People came from across the country and around the world for our first of its kind event in Emmitsburg, Maryland, a Eucharistic Congress for the deaf.
Hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
More than 200 participated in the 3-day event, which featured speakers, adoration, confession, mass, and fellowship.
And I feel like this is a reunion for me, a Catholic reunion, and that's why it's inspiring me. It's a wonderful experience for me because, you know, I travel a lot and I give talks a lot. I've given homilies and so on. So today, I feel like a student being here. I am learning so much.
The event was inspired by the National Eucharistic Congress, which took place last summer in Indianapolis.
Last year, when the United States celebrated the Deaf Eucharistic Congress, there were deaf people present and they had interpreters. But Connie Wild's desire was that everything be in sign language and to attract more of the deaf community throughout the United States.
Under the leadership of Father Mike Depkick, the first Eucharistic Congress for the Deaf took shape after a year's worth of planning.
All of you and eat of it, for this is my body, which will be given up for you.
With fewer than 10 deaf priests serving the entire deaf Catholic population in the United States, the Eucharistic Congress for the Deaf was a great opportunity for deaf Catholics to receive the sacraments in a language they feel most understood, sign language.
And the deaf are so excited to come to the sacraments. Confession, penance, a deaf priest in my culture who's same like me that understands my language.
So I help the deaf community understand that Jesus is there for them. And whatever happens in their lives, the challenges that they face, that with Jesus they can overcome them, and the Eucharist is a source of strength for them.
The hope is that this becomes an annual event, attracting more people every year as the word spreads. One priest working in deaf apostolate shared the special spirituality the deaf Catholic community experiences.
But because ASL allows the deaf community to command more of their body and to employ it in the interaction with other people, the theology of the incarnation becomes explosive. And so when they are, for example, deep diving into the Gospels, the whole Gospel becomes alive. It's not English vocabulary just changed into a certain sign to match it. It's a movie that's transpiring in front of you.
Julia Convery, EWTN News Nightly.
Julia, great story, thank you. And thank you for watching tonight. Remember, you can follow us on social media, of course, Facebook, X, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Owen Jensen. Good night. God bless.